To our surprise, that Harvard said they were looking for students who cared for something greater than themselves. And we're like, okay, great. So now we need to raise someone. We call that today humanitarian driven. We want to raise someone who's intellectually ambitious.
Welcome to another edition of the Journey to Freedom podcast. And we are now in 2025, and I'm Dr. B, your host. Just excited about what this year is going to expose for us. Some of us make New Year's resolutions, some of us set goals. I just did a goal setting workshop for folks with the theme of setting goals and focus only on those goals. You will struggle. And really started talking about outcomes and things you want to achieve, and then the activities and the disciplines that it takes to get there. I think sometimes we forget that. We say we want this to happen, and then we said, this is my goal, but don't realize there's some work usually involved in making those things happen. And sometimes we don't want to do whatever it is that work is to be able to do it. The example I use all the time is, hey, I want to be a world-class swimmer. But I only want to go to the pool 3 times a week, and those two things just don't go together. The other thing that we really sometimes don't even talk about is the cost. Everything that we do that we change from what we're doing, there's a cost that's associated. And sometimes the cost is good and sometimes the cost is bad. And so, especially when we think about relationships and family and, hey, I'm going to go do these things and it's going to take me an extra 20, 25 hours every single week to be able to do it. Well, the cost short term might be time that you have with your family. The cost long term might be, I didn't do it. If I don't do it, right, then I don't get to have some of the things that others have because I wasn't willing to go through it. And so seeing what that cost is and seeing, if you can do it, has to go into the time that you're planning. And so I'm excited that, last year, like one of my goals was, before I say what one of my goals was, is when you set goals, it also has to be something that you can control. You say, well, my goal is to have, let's say we're podcasting right now. My goal is to have 100,000 subscribers, right? I have zero control over that unless I know 100,000 people that I can go twist their arm and convince them, to say subscribe, right? I have no control of that, but I can control the activity that it takes to do. Well, last year I said in 2024, I was going to interview 100 Black men about what it meant to be successful. I could totally control that. I might not know the men now, and most of them I didn't know, but I can control the activity like everybody that I interviewed. Do you have somebody else I can interview? And they would give me 3 or 4 names, right? And so knowing that and knowing, my ability to be able to stay consistent and do things, we did 105. And we got there and I said, wait a minute, this is good stuff. These are some really neat people. I don't want to say the people are neat. I'm just saying the possibility of talking to men that I had never talked to before that I didn't know their stories before. I didn't know what their definitions of success was. I just knew that I kept talking to men that were saying they didn't see success in our community a lot, that they didn't see a lot of people making it. They saw more people that were struggling than people who were making it. And I wanted to change that narrative. And so today we have Nathaniel A. Turner on today. And so he's written several books. He understands what it means to work with people and to help people. We were talking about, what his goals and how he wants world dominance this year. And so we're gonna jump into that a little bit today. But first, I wanted him to be able to tell his story. And so, Nathan, thank you for being on this podcast today. Thank you for being willing to show us what it means to be able to be successful as a Black man in America who's still, we're standing on the shoulders of the giants that we've been part of. But at the same time, it's time to move forward. It's time to have world dominance, as you said. And so thank you for being willing to explain that to us. And go ahead and tell us a little bit about you, your story, how your life and what it's been like.
Sure. So I am Nathaniel A. Turner. I am the first child of Tommy L. and Gladys T. Turner. I'm a product of Gary, Indiana, and all of the people that make up Gary, Indiana. As I tell people everywhere, that we're all an amalgamation of people, places, and things that are part of our life. I am the first person in my family to go to college, the first person in my family to receive a master's degree and subsequently a doctorate degree. I'm the father of one child, one biological child. If you know of any other children that I don't know about, let me know. But I have one that I'm certain is mine. His name is Naeem. Today I call him Dr. TB. He holds a PhD in electrical computer engineering from Carnegie Mellon and is currently in the second year of his MBA at NYU. I'm the husband of Latanya Turner. I don't know if she always feels like I'm the proud husband of hers, but I'm the husband of Latanya Turner. She's also Dr. Turner. She's the dean of Marion University School of Education. I could go on, but I guess that's the most important two people in my life and the first two people who brought me into this planet.
Oh, cool. That is, thank you for sharing that. Gary, Indiana, Jackson 5, right? That's where they were all about. Mm-hmm. Were you around at the time when they were there?
I was.
Go to school?
Yeah, I didn't go to school with any of them. I'm 59, so I was around. I was alive when they were around. But my objective, when I mentioned to you world domination, is to give people some other person to remember from Gary, and hopefully I'll do enough in my lifetime that when people say Gary, they'll also say Nate Turner.
Gotcha. Well, and I also think of all the other stories that I've heard from Gary, Indiana, being predominantly, a Black area in many aspects, and a lot of struggles and a lot of triumphs that have come out of Gary, but also a lot of discourse, whether it was the civil rights era and what folks had to do. When you talk about world dominance, and this is a really cool subject to talk about, what are some of the things that you mean by that? So for those who might not have the connection of what
in all seriousness, like I was thinking about Pinky and the Brain, it says complete and total world domination. But
yes, exactly. I was thinking, what do you do today? Trying to change the world.
Right. But I do mean, in all seriousness, not that I want to dominate like economically and be one of the wealthiest people in the world. But what I really mean is that when my time on this planet is up, I want to make a dent in the universe so loud that it rings long after I'm gone. I want to do enough for people to know who I was when I was here. And I'm sure we'll talk about it. But for me, like the word who is the most important word in the human language. And I don't think we think enough about who. And that who for me is who did you help, who did you serve, and who knew their life mattered because of you. And that's what I mean by world domination. That if I do enough in my lifetime, enough people will know that their lives matter.
Gotcha. Who'd you help, who'd you serve?
And who knew their life mattered because of you.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I was doing a podcast yesterday with a guy who wrote a book called the happiness equation, and he was kind of saying some of the same things. This is, what does it take to be happy? What does it take? Sometimes we think of success as being the amount of money that we have, or the amount of fame that we have, or the amount of, whatever it is that other people can look to see. And some of it is, when we have that servant heart, we have that servant leader. Some people may never even know, until after that you were there to even be part of what's being helped. And so I love that. Who do I help? Who did I serve? As a most person. So you're really talking about legacy, and what are some of the things? I know an author is part of it, but what are some of the things that you've been able to do or are doing that are starting to create legacy?
Well, so it's interesting about legacy. So if I can, and I'm going to elaborate a little bit on that who part. Okay. The interesting about legacy is that there's three other elements to who. The first part of who is, for me, is that when you ask someone like me who you are, I can give you the definition of or description of who I believe that I am. So I'll use father. I use this all the time. If you ask me who I am as a father, I say, Dr. B, I'm the world's greatest father.
Child's pose. Toes together, the knees apart. Maybe keep your butt a little higher so you can have somewhere to drop your chest through. And then forehead down.
Okay, I apologize for that. You could ask me who I am, and I could say, as a father, I could say I'm the world's greatest father. And then you could say, well, who does your son believe you are? And I'd say, oh, I believe my son thinks I'm the world's greatest father. And then you could say, well, can I talk to your son? And you might talk to him. You say, hey, Naeem, what kind of dad is your father? And you say, he's a jerk. Well, then who am I? So when I think about legacy, I think what we think we're creating as a legacy is less about us. It's less about what we think. It's less about what we believe other people will think. And it's simply about the people that we are in relationship with, how they view us. So when I'm gone, the world will decide. And I believe they'll decide based upon as I said before, who I help, who I serve, and who I let know their life matters. Only then will I have a legacy maybe that is worth discussing.
Wow, and you bring up such an interesting point, because usually when somebody asks you or you introduce yourself and they say who you are, you tell them what part of you want them to know. And it's interesting. What if we were to say, ask the people around us, who am I? And then you introduce yourself as what others perceive you to be, right. Instead of the thing that you'll think that this is what they need to know about who I am in order for us to begin this conversation. Yeah, so I love that, because it really is thinking about the perspective of the eyes that are looking at us and how we impact those eyes instead of how we see it.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I was gonna say, I always say to people that when our time on this earth is up, who we are is not going to be determined by us. I won't write my obituary. Someone else will. They'll tell you who I was. I won't give my eulogy. Someone else will. They'll tell you who I was. I won't write the last words on my tomb or an urn or wherever my family decides, if they decide to put me anywhere. I won't write those words. They will. And so I'd rather not get caught up me thinking about who I am and be more interested in the ways that I treat people, so that when I'm gone, I hopefully I can be who it is that I hope to be while I'm here.
Wow. That thank you for that, because now I'm thinking of the few people who write their eulogy, other good stuff, and to write their obituary, right? And those folks that we just go, okay, so that tells a lot about your character and who you are, by the fact that you want to control that, as I'm doing like mortgages and stuff, and I do reverse mortgages, and you'll laugh at this. I sit down with a lady she was 90. And wanted to do a reverse mortgage so she could remodel her house. I was there, and so her son lived with her. And her son was 72 years old. And she was saying, well, this is how we're going to design it. This is what the kitchen's going to look like. This is what kind of carpet you can buy. This is what kind of, and he's like, Mom, I don't want all that stuff. She's like, no, if this is going to be my house after I'm gone, then this is what you're going to have. And so, you think about that, how many of us try to do that where we control even beyond the time that we're going to be here. So I definitely appreciate that. You've written several books. And the reason you write books, and the reason that I wrote my books, is because I hope that they would help people. You hope that somebody's going to take that and can transform their lives. What are what kind of books are you writing, and why is it so important to you to make sure that you're putting that stuff down on people?
So I most of everything I've done in the last 30 years is related to a relationship that I have with a child. So with my son, I started writing a child, an unborn child, notes about what it is that I would want for that child's life. I didn't have a particularly great relationship with my father, thought I would be a terrible father, thought one of the things I could do, maybe not to mess it up, was make notes about the things I wanted for a child, and then maybe write notes to the child to let the child know for sure, let them know for certain that I did love them in the event that I messed it up. And what I ended up doing when my son was 2 was started to write him letters. At his bequest, he said, Dad, one day he wanted mail. I told him there was nothing in the mailbox but junk. He refused to accept that as an answer. And so thus a campaign to start writing my son letters began, and I continued to write him to this day. The first book then was a collection of letters that I'd written him from age 2 to 16. And we titled the book called Raising Superman, Superman. Superman for two reasons. One, because I can't call him Superman because I didn't want to be sued by DC Comics. And secondly, Superman, because when he was a child, as most children do, he could not pronounce R's correctly. But because he was learning to read so early, he learned to read by age 2, and he learned to read because he was reading his father's letters. I just would say to him, well, don't worry about pronouncing it as a Superman because you're my Superman. And so I've been calling him Soup ever since. So that's the first thing that I wrote, and it exists because of a love for a child.
I love that. One of the themes that has been prevalent in most of my interviews has been this thing called being a dad and what it means to be a dad. And one of the things in the way that I've kind of taken it, and it started early on in the conversation, is we talked about a lot of the single moms. We talked about a lot of dads who, weren't around for whatever reasons, or couldn't be because of incarceration or whatever it's been. And the struggle and what some men had to do to be able to be around their kids and the fight that they had to make. One of the things that really came to I guess light with me is making sure that it's not that the kids need a dad, because I believe every child needs a dad and it's so important, and that's like probably one of the most important things that can happen in their life. But for us as men who have children, how important it is for us to be a dad, and how fulfilling it is for us to be a dad, and how we change who we are because we're a dad. Kind of, as you kind of talked about that from your perspective, the meaning of being a dad, because I see it's very important to you. And, maybe talk to other men about, how much it does mean to be able to.
Yeah, so I'll begin with this. I did not want to be a father. And so I told everyone that if it hadn't been for animated movie for about an hour and 30 minutes, I would not be a father. I would not be on here having this conversation with you. In 1993, in June of 1993, my wife, correct. June of 1994, my wife, who I've been married to just short of a year, told me that she was ready to be a mother. And she was about to turn 30 and was concerned that her biological clock was ticking. I tried to inform her that her biological clock was digital and she could not hear it. So she was having no parts of that. So, so she takes me to this movie, and it's called The Lion King. And I don't want to be a father because, as I mentioned, my father and I didn't have a good relationship. Mm-hmm. But I watched on the screen two lions, a cub and a full-grown lion, have this remarkable relationship. And I said in that movie, aha, I could be a dad. And if I'm a dad, Mufasa is the father I want to be, and Simba is the son I want to have. So that became my template for what I was going to do as a father. And everything about my relationship with my son since then has been guided by that. I want to be Mufasa, and I want him to be Simba, and I want him to have moments where we might disagree, etc. Mm-hmm. And I have to be the disciplinarian. But when it's all said and done, I want him to be able to climb on my shoulders and say to me, Dad, we're pals, right?
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. And so how has that impacted you, as you now go through, you have a son and you're going through this thing called life, right?
And we're still pals. Yes.
And you're still pals. But the decisions that you make and the direction and the way you lead your life is different when they're the center, right? I mean,
yeah, absolutely. So just like the movie, I mean, and this is, it may sound odd to someone, but just like the movie, his life for me, what I watched Mufasa do. First of all, I saw the movie and saw about 50 lessons that I thought parents could extract from it.
Yeah.
So in the very beginning, I said, okay, and my wife, hey, look, they're not naming this child immediately. They took some time to name this child. Between the moment that Simba is presented by Rafiki to the village, there's a period of time that goes, it lapses, and the child doesn't have a name. So like, all right, well, why is that? So we look, there's a history that our people, Jewish people as well, would spend 8 days. They would not name a child for the first 8 days. And the reason they wouldn't do it is because they were concerned that the child was going to die. And they didn't want to give the child a name and then have to suffer that. So they also would wait 8 days, as you know, and to watch the characteristics of a child. So, okay, we're going to do that. And so those principles, introducing him to Simba to the village. Well, we wrote everyone we knew. So if I knew you back then in 1995, Doc, you would have gotten a letter from us and said, hey, we're having a child. We don't know what we're having, boy, girl. We're thinking about 10 names, 10 boy. We have 10 male names, 10 female names. We've chosen a last name that's different from ours. I'll explain that in a minute. But we want you to come by and spend time with this baby. And we're asking you to do this because we know you're going to be part of the village. Now, the science told us that if we got you to help be a part of the naming ceremony, you would feel more responsibility to that child. So we asked people to do that. And they came by and they spent time with him and they helped us to name him. His name became Naim. So it's Naim, which is benevolent, Kahari, which means kingly. So he's the benevolent king. We gave him a hyphenated last name, which is Turner Bandeli, which is Yoruba, which means born away from home. So his full name is he is a benevolent king, despite being born from slavery, because I have a slave name, and born away from home. And so everything about his life has been built around this ideal that he's going to be a benevolent king.
Oh my gosh, that's so neat. How do you get to modern day, hospitals without walking out of there with the name?
Right? Baby boy. It was Baby Boy Turner, and they were like, you got to get a baby a name. I said, no, I don't. There's no legal responsibility for me to get a child a name. So that's what happens when you just graduate from law school and you think you're going to sue everybody. Hey, go ahead, try it. I'm taking my baby home would be without a name. So that's what we did.
So, your son has two parents, and I can tell from you just talking about your wife that she is a strong woman. And so when it comes to parental values and raising a child, how do you guys come together on how we're gonna raise it?
I will say this. I would say I've been very fortunate, lucky, blessed, whatever term you want to use. I've been all of that. I married a woman who recognized that the guy she married was a little bit different and was willing to tolerate me enough to just see if what I was suggesting was going to work. So one of the first things that she and I did as parents, because I was in law school when I met her, and when I finished law school, I was unemployed. And I thought, man, this is terrible. I've done everything everyone has asked me to do. Like I grew up in Gary, it's 97% African-American. At the time, it was the murder capital of the world. I was told the best I could hope to do in high school was join the military, but that was not to be an officer or a gentleman. But so I'm like, I've done everything you all asked me to do. And guess what? I'm still just like my father. I'm unemployed. And so I thought, well, what did I do wrong? And I thought, well, if I go into a different law school, if I go into Harvard, if I go into Yale, if I go into Princeton, if I go into Stanford, right, I would certainly have a job. So we decided then to backward design that child's life so that when the child got to be my age, the child never had to wonder if there was a place that they could work because the degree that they had from the institution they had was not substantive enough for people to think him important enough to hire him. So we got an application from Harvard. And we designed the life for a child backward before the child was born using Harvard's application.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So what was that like? So what are some of the things that you chose to do as a result?
Sure. So there's three things in the application that we noted in 1994, which the first one was that Harvard, of course, as they still do, look for students who have great grades and test scores. That goes without saying. We have turned that to be called intellectual ambition. We think there's too much emphasis and focus on grades and test scores and not enough attention paid to whether or not people can think critically and whether or not people understand how to think critically. So we're going to teach our son how to use the Socratic method as one, but certainly make sure he could score well on test scores and do well academically in the classroom. But the second part that they asked for in 1994 was they said they were looking for people who were world citizens. And so today we call that being globally and culturally competent. In 1994, it just meant to us that maybe we need to make sure our child can speak more than one language. And so we went about this process of making sure he could speak more than one language. He can speak 4 languages, was introduced to 6, but can speak 4 fluently. And the third element that we found in the application was that to our surprise, is that Harvard said that they were looking for students who cared for something greater than themselves. And we're like, okay, great. So now we need to raise someone. We call that today humanitarian driven. And so those are the 3 elements. We want to raise someone who's intellectually ambitious, someone who's globally and culturally competent, and somebody who's humanitarian driven. And everything in his life would be guided by those 3 principles.
So you brought up this is what the application was in 1994. Did that application change 18 years later, or was it
pretty much the same thing? Still, Harvard's still looking for the same, allegedly, they're still looking for the same quality of people.
Okay. What was cost of college ever a factor? I mean, Harvard has different rules, right? They have the scholarships that go for lots of people, and the endowment and everything goes with it, and then some people actually have to pay.
So the thing was, the Harvard was just sort of, if you will, a North Star. Like if Harvard believing Harvard is the top institution in the world, top institution certainly in America. Well, what do we do to make sure that the child is not me? Like no disrespect to the schools I attended. I attended Butler University for undergrad. I attended Valparaiso University for law school. Nice schools. None of them are Ivy League schools. None of them are Harvard. So when I walk into a room, no one ever says the name of the institution I attended first. Mm-hmm. But if I attended Harvard, people would say ordinarily, "Hey, we have Harvard trained lawyer Nate Turner, blah blah blah." Mm-hmm. So Harvard was just the North Star. Knowing that the admissions rates are 3 to 5%, there's no guarantee. That's the outcome. Like that's focusing on outcome. The process is, can we do enough that your grades are great? Can we do enough that you know how to take these standardized tests well? Can we do enough that you learn other languages, you understand other people and other cultures? Can we do enough that you care deeply for something greater than yourself?
So you put your son, obviously you care tremendously about not only his life as he's growing up, but his life as an adult. In order to do that, you guys had to go onto your own quest for education and learning. Your son can't learn 5 languages and be exposed to 6, and you not know any of it. And the way I'm hearing it is you probably learned those in those years where it's easier for a child to learn languages than it is for an adult to learn languages.
So shamefully, I will tell you, I don't speak any other language but maybe Ebonics. So after today, we can question how well I know the King's English. But what we were able to do is again, this is 95. So we didn't have Duolingo, any of that stuff. And I am a recently graduated law student with no job initially, and my wife is working for a university as an admissions officer, and I don't think she probably made more than $23,000. But my summers, I worked for Macmillan McGraw-Hill School Publishing, and the last summer that I worked for them, they gave me a bunch of books, and oddly, they gave me some books and audio tapes, and they were language tapes, and there were some books about childhood learning. And one of the authors I came across, his name was Glenn Doman. And unbeknownst to me, Glenn Doman had been training children with brain injuries for years. And Mr. Doman had taught children with brain injuries to be able to read and do sophisticated math problems by 18 months. And I'm like, whoa, this is crazy. Our child's not going to have any brain injuries. Why don't we just do what Mr. Doman did? So the reading and the math, those things we learned early on from those texts from Mr. Doman. But they also had the language tapes. So rather than go say gaga Google or play the typical nursery rhymes in the crib, we played the language tapes because we also had learned about what the brain does in sort of learning languages as an infant and so forth. So yeah, he was really kind of a project and our little personal guinea pig, but I did not learn any other languages.
You weren't picking them up. on the baby monitor.
I was hearing what that hola, como está, bien tu, guten morgen, guten tarde, guten. Yeah, I heard all of that stuff, but I didn't learn it. He learned it well enough that by the time he started at 3 at this international school, I think he was there maybe 6 weeks, and he was done talking Spanish to me. I would say, hola. He was like, Dad, you don't know enough Spanish. You don't know enough Spanish to talk to me. I'm like, okay, all right, excuse me. Yep.
So, when we think of our culture, when we think of, what it is to raise a child in a community, in a village raising a child, and, your son had grandparents and people that you spoke with, was there some protection against some of those things, the goo-goos and the gagas, or did you let him experience community as world, everything? Talk to me about what his upbringing was like, knowing your goals.
So I was pretty clear to everyone that I talked to that he was not. They were not allowed to call him a baby. I have an acronym I use for him. I to tell people he's my MIT. He's my man in training, and I'd say that he's as close to being a man. He's closer to being a man than he's ever close to being a baby. We don't work in reverse. We life moves forward. And I would use and when people would argue with me, I say, well, let's play this little game around Old MacDonald. And like, the song, right? I'll go, Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-L, and the farm he had a chick. Mm-hmm. And then I said, but what was Old MacDonald raising? And they like chicken. I said, but so you don't talk about chicks. You talk about chicken. You don't talk about piglet. You talk about pig. You don't talk about calf. You talk about cow. I said, but yet when it comes to men and women, you always want to talk about you raising boys or girls. You're not raising boys or girls. You're raising men and women. And so I said, I don't want you to do that. So he's my man in training. You can call him little man. You can call him, but just by his name, but do not ask me if I have a boy. So I was very specific about that. In terms of his village, I wanted him to know everybody. So just like in The Lion King, right, there's the village and there's lions and there's the gazelles, there's the donkeys, there's the elephants, everybody's there. I was like, okay, I want you to know everyone. And so we have this thing that we teach families, and it's called how to have a domestic exchange. Because too often in America, I'm from Gary. I didn't know anybody that didn't look like me in Gary. It wasn't until I got to college when I saw white students, and in many ways, white students saw me. And it was not always a good first introduction. Like, they had all of these ideas about who I was, and I had all these ideas about who they were. And I wanted to make sure that my child was not encumbered with that baggage that I had. So we made sure that his village was comprised of lots of people. Today he has what we call affectionately he has Jewish grandparents. They're Stuart and Janine, and they're Jewish. They have a Muslim uncle, Uncle Eric. So there's people in his family, and not about to say family. These are not DNA. These are extended. Right. Yeah.
So, so someone has said, well, you're helicopter parents and you're controlling every aspect. Were there things that you didn't want to make, or like you wanted to make sure he wasn't exposed to? I'm thinking about like athletics and the whole world of what it means to, have your kid, as I've coached athletics and, had parents where my child is ranked, and then they're living their life through, like, ranked, what the heck does that mean? Ranked in what? Like, who makes the ranking? The person you pay the money so that he can do the sport. So did you keep them away from some of those incidents? You put them in and oh.
Yeah, no. So my wife ran track in college. She was pretty good, and so got a scholarship to college and had a number of scholarships. And so his first pair of shoes that he could officially walk in were track shoes. Okay. We could not get him to walk. So we bought him a pair of running shoes because he would run to the wall and put his hand out and sit down. So we're like, okay. So we bought him a pair of track shoes, and we were both working at Purdue University at the time, and we took him out to one of the local high schools. And she and I would run sprints. We'd run a sprint, and he would run or jog along, chase after us, and the person then would run back and turn him around, and he would run with the next person. So we figured out pretty early he might have an interest in running. And so when he was old enough, I think 5 or 6, He set him up and joined the local track club. But as a 4-year-old, we introduced him to soccer. He played soccer from 4 till 18. At 16, he left the country and played soccer in Brazil. That was his decision to make. So I know people might say it sometimes. You mentioned helicopter parents. So if I could, I would say, I tell people all the time, you complain about a helicopter until it is an emergency and you need one to pick you up. So I have no problem. I have no problem with any label you choose to give me. I'll find a positive way to look at it. But yeah, he played all the sports, played football. Played football, European football. He played soccer, and he ran track. He was at one point was ranked second in the nation in the 800. He ran a 159. I think it's a 12-year-old. Yeah, he was pretty good. We thought he might run at in college or run in the Olympics, but the choice was to play soccer instead.
Where'd your wife run track at? Just curious.
She ran in Illinois in high school at Danville, and then she went to school and ran at the school Missouri Valley in somewhere just outside of Columbia, Missouri. Yeah.
Gotcha.
But I think she had a scholarship.
Big track guy. So
you said you were?
Yeah, I ran track in college, and
where did you run?
For 38 years, and so.
Where did you run?
I went at Azusa Pacific University, is where
I've heard of it.
From Colorado, and so. Just had, I got to run in Europe and all that kind of stuff. And
really?
Able to coach some Olympians and some high school kids who have done really well.
I wish we had known you then. I wish we had known you because what event did you run?
I was a 400 hurler.
Okay.
So, so all the guys that that you've heard of, I know what their backs look like because I wasn't good enough to be there, but I was good enough to be in the race.
So you can appreciate a 12-year-old running a 159.
Oh, absolutely. You said that, I'm going, wow.
At 5'5".
Whoa! Oh my gosh, that is incredible.
So he's probably grown 2 inches or so since then, and so he started out as a 400-meter runner, but that got to be really tough. So and especially playing soccer. So he just, he had the endurance, so it had enough speed, and like 800 seems like a good event for you. And
wow, that's so cool. So he's 30 years old now, or right?
29, yeah. 29. Right around 30 is right around the corner. Yeah.
So was it all worth it? Was all the things you did when you look back and you go, hindsight is 2020, and we all as a parents make mistakes, and talk to me about your
the journey.
We did it.
The journey's been great. The journey's been great. He is just today as an example. We put him on a plane to Taiwan. So he was home for the break, and I think one of the unique things is, at least for me, is that I know that he and I are best friends, that's exactly what I was hoping. So when I hear some of my peers, and I can't wait for my kids to leave or da da da, I'm like, man, he could. Like my wife probably thinks we would get rid of her and he and I would stay together. So we're all still, she too, the three of us are still very connected in that regard. So it's all been worth it to watch him do exactly what I hoped he would do, which was to have a life that was better than mine. His life has been tremendously better. He's, a young man, when you're 16 and you finished all your high school requirements, and you can say to your parents, I don't really want to go back to school for my senior year. It's a waste. And your parents can say, you're right. You've done everything. And you say, I want to chase my dream. And you move to Brazil and have a chance to play in the top academy in Brazil and travel to Germany and et cetera. Like you travel the globe chasing your dream. And you can do that when you're young enough. And when he comes back, he has, at least because he has a concussion. And so he returns and he doesn't want to do it anymore. And he's been alone enough. And he's like, okay, I think I'm ready to go to college. And so he applies to 31 of America's best schools, and he gets accepted to 27 of them. And he gets somewhere between $5 and $10 million worth of scholarship money offered to him for undergrad. He says he goes, and having been in Brazil and watching his teammates who live in Brazilian favelas and be in a place where electricity is not always stable and energy is not always good, he says, you know what? I know exactly what I want to do now. I want to use technology to enhance the lives of people who have been historically and geographically underserved and underrepresented. I'm going to go be an engineer. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so 4 years later, he's starting his PhD. He went to undergrad at Santa Clara University in California, and then starts his PhD after getting 7 full PhD fellowships. He starts at Carnegie Mellon. And then he says, when I'm done, I'm starting my own corporation. And so I need to go to business school. And so he applies, gets admitted to 4 of America's best business schools, and then he gets another full ride, and he goes out to NYU and starts his own company. So yeah, it's all been worth it. His life is. He and I are now the same age. When my wife told me that her biological clock was ticking, we're the same age, and I'm like, wow, I can actually see that he is in such a much better position than I ever was.
Than you were.
Yep.
Yeah, when I think about like the children we have 8 children and 16 grandkids right now.
Ooh.
Next year. And so, and I think about those times, and now I see myself as you're saying that they are in better places than I ever was at the age I was at. I don't know how much things I would have done differently. Now I find myself racing them, like, well, you can't pass me up yet. I'm still alive, right? And I'm an athlete, right? I'm a competitor. So you can't go make 5 times as much as me, because if you do, then when of course that's what you wanted for him. That's Absolutely. The whole thing. Like one of my daughters, like yours, she's like her sophomore year in high school. She's like, I don't want to do high school. This stuff is nonsense. I don't. What about the prom? And like, she's the prom. I can go dance with anybody. Right. I'd rather be in. And she went to fashion school, so she went to FITM. In Los Angeles, and so, like, okay, let me figure out what we need to do to make sure you graduate as a sophomore, or take the GED or whatever you have.
Whatever
to do,
it is, absolutely.
And enroll in FITM, and then her life today is just amazing as a 30-year-old, because she was born in '92, so she's probably a little bit years older than your son, but oh my gosh, so. Thank you very much for talking about your child and just painting that picture of what's possible, because so many people think that I already have to be there in order to raise somebody that can dominate, as we keep saying, dominate the world. Right? What about you though? So you don't get to go to or you go to law school, you graduate, you're finding it hard to find employment. You're from a predominantly Black community that you haven't seen a lot of the world to be able to do it. Now you're starting to integrate into a society where attorneys are in the 1990s, right? Because there's not, Johnny Cochran and anybody else, right?
Right.
How do you now navigate in a world that you haven't been part of?
So I went to law school in part because I made a promise to my best friend growing up. His name is Dr. Willie Underwood III. So Willie and I promised, or he made me promise, that he was going to be the doctor and I was going to be the lawyer. This is in high school. Mm-hmm. Willie is taking special ed classes. So I kid you not. And I am a marginal student at best. So when we graduate, his last name is Underwood U, mine is Turner T. We're in the back of the room, as you would imagine, because of our alphabet. But no, we're in the back of the room because there are 247 people graduating our class, and I'm like 202, and he probably is like 232. Like, we're at the back because we're in the back. No one is expecting us to do anything. But he has made us this promise that he's going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a lawyer. He goes off to Morehouse. I go off to Butler. We both end up graduating the same year. Then he enrolls in medical school, and he comes home, and I bought a car. And he says, and I can't use the language he uses to me then, you have messed up the plan. Like, this is the clean version. Our plan was you supposed to be a lawyer. How you going to be a lawyer? You done got indebted behind a car. You better take your behind off this. So I go to law school because that is the commitment that I made to him. But I also think that at the time when I go to law school, what I really want to do is I want to be the world's premier human rights leader. in our community. So I have a bachelor's degree in accounting, and I think, okay, cool, I understand the economic portion of our community. I started getting a master's in history and theology. So like I got the theological, most of our leaders come from the church. And I said, and then there's some of our leaders that come from the legal profession, but never have we had one who has done all of it. So that is initially was my aspiration in going to law school. But after my first semester of law school, I realized I didn't want to be a lawyer. I enjoyed the legal education and the thought, the challenging, the intellect, but I didn't care I didn't want to be a lawyer. I'd seen O.J. Simpson get off, and I'd seen the fact that I thought whether or not I believe O.J. was innocent or guilty. I thought, well, here's the problem, that the law doesn't work for poor people still. That this is a system that's geared around people with wealth and privilege. And so people are mad because this black guy has now been able to use his wealth and privilege that people have been using forever. But what kind of system is this? So like, I want to do something where people are not showing up after they got in trouble. Like, what can I do that feels more preventative than the afterwards? So that's why I didn't practice law. But I couldn't quit law school because I'm from Gary. And people were looking at me as if somehow I had accomplished something. Hey, Nate's in law school. And if I had to come back to the neighborhood and told people that I quit, then I'd have said to people that, quitting is acceptable and that, it's too difficult. So I stayed and finished. And then I met this woman and she thought I was going to be a lawyer. So you can't ask somebody to marry you and she thinks you're going to be a lawyer. And then you're like, oh, baby, by the way, I changed my mind. Right. So like, I got to finish this. I got to finish the. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So what did you? So you don't practice law. You want to be in human rights. Do you get to do that? Do you get to live in purpose? What is that?
Again, these are things I think I'm going to do. So here's what I'm doing, and now 30 years later, I think I should have just kept doing that. So while I was in law school, the university, Valparaiso University, asked me if I would help them. First of all, it's not true. I was helping some young students. So there were undergraduate students that would show up on campus who are like me, who are from Gary and Chicago, mostly from those areas, who had not been in an environment like Valparaiso, which is mostly white. And they were struggling. So because I'd already had that experience, I thought, well, I'll help them. So I created this program for them called AMASP. So it's African Men in America Survival Techniques. So the young men who were recruited there, mostly recruited as athletes, a lot of them weren't getting degrees. So every week I would work with them on things to help them personally and socially so that they could finish. The sisters on campus got mad at me because I was just working with the brothers and said, hey, well, what about us? So I changed it to APAS, which is African People in America Survival Technique. So I was like, okay, I got brothers and sisters, and I would take them to show them how to, if they were going out to a restaurant, how to eat. People didn't know the difference between, a salad fork and the knives. And so these are all things I was sharing with them. And the university got wind of it, that there was this guy in the law school that was helping some of the undergrads. And so the university invited me to then start sharing with students that were visiting campus because they were trying to recruit more students of color. So the families would come in and I got a chance to speak to folks. And before you know it, Doc, I got a chance and I was traveling and having these talks with people. And I was like, you know what? This is exactly what I want to do. And I wrote what would have been my first book. And I did not publish it because I was like, people are going to be mad at me if I publish this book. And I was getting ready to be a father. So long story short, I finished law school. I take a job at Purdue University, and I'm their assistant director of the affirmative action program. And I am their liaison for the American with Disabilities Act. And I was there for about 18 months, and I hated it because everybody who saw me was still mad at me. So the very thing I just said I didn't want to do as a lawyer, people were showing up after something bad had happened.
As if you were a lawyer, yeah. Okay,
right. Yeah. So I had an accounting degree, background in finance, and the theological piece. And I went and took some career assessments, and one of them said, "Have you considered financial planning?" And I'm like, "I don't even know what that is." Well, long story short, that's what I've been doing now for the last 30 years. I thought it was a way to help people proactively instead of reactively. I feel a little bit different about that today, but that's what I started, and that's where I've been since.
Gotcha. So you guys are both working at the university, right? She's administrator. You're working there, doing whatever you can to make it good for folks.
To not be her unemployed, irresponsible.
To raise your son to be able to do all the things that he's wanting to do. African American studies. So you're part of, a culture that you're trying to help folks do. What is your feelings about now and the opportunities that we have? Not even compared to what, I'm not, because I'm the same age as you. So we think of like our lifetime and the things that we were able to do. The folks that have been from before us, I'm taking a group of men to Alabama for like a civil rights thing at the end of this month, just because of, hey, so many of us are feeling so stuck and traumatized and all these things that prevent us from moving forward. And yet we've had more opportunity than anybody now. And I can say I'm on the opposite side of you, because at my high school, there's 3,500 students and there was 30 of us that were Black. And I was in a whole different world of, what I got to see, what I got to experience, and what I knew might be possible if only we could. So kind of just walk me through that journey, or what you think, folks should be able to pay attention to that can move forward.
Sure. So my undergrad experience was just as you described. So you can imagine when you're from Gary and it's 97% Black and Latino, but I would say 90% Black, 7% Latino, and like 3% white. And so, and the Gary's history is unique because it's the first city in America with a Black mayor. And so, when I hear people saying they want more Black stuff, I'm like, listen, the place I grew up, that's all they were. The superintendents, the doctors, the nurses, the police chiefs, everybody was. So that's not a new experience to me. When my mother dropped me off at Butler, there are
different than your friend that went to Morehouse.
My friend went to Morehouse,
college, right?
Right. I'm at Butler. There are 38 Black students on campus. Yeah. So out of 3,000 students, so that is a uniquely different situation. But Doc, I think that one of the benefits, and you said, well, who am I? I should have said this. I am named Nathaniel A. Turner. I mentioned that. But what I didn't say is that my initials are NAT. So my father intentionally named me after Nat Turner.
Gotcha. Okay.
My mother intentionally named me Nathaniel, which is Hebrew for gift of God. So my understanding of my life is a little bit different, I think, than some of us. It's that I understand that I am a descendant of people who have survived struggle. So, and their struggles are way greater than any struggle that I can ever have. So when I hear people lamenting whatever's going on in their life, I just think about people like Nat Turner. I just nearly need to look at my name to remember, like, whatever it is I think I'm complaining about. There's never been a whip to my back. There's never been an ancestor of mine sold on an auction block. Like, I've never worked in any fields. I don't have any calluses on my hand from doing that. Yeah, I know that the world is brutal and people can be mean and mean-spirited and all that stuff, but I don't have that. So if my ancestors could survive through that, then I can survive anything. And not only I can survive, I can thrive, I can prosper. But it really is about how I see the world.
Wow, I love it. I have been, and I don't want to apologize because that would just be lying that I'm sorry about it. But I directed this conversation in a way that it's benefited me and hopefully the listeners as well. But I haven't given you an opportunity to talk about what you really love or what your passion is or what you want the audience to know. So I'd love for you to take some time down.
It's interesting because I always tell people I don't have an agenda. Like, whatever it is that so when I said to you earlier, I said, hey, I want to be a renowned, two things I say every day, and people know is that I write in a journal every morning. So each morning, the first 20 minutes, I write my life the way I like it to be as opposed to how it is. So I would say to you or anyone who's saying, you're feeling traumatized or triggered by anything that's going on in this country, which I get it. Instead of waking up with that thought you went to bed with last night, try this. Try to write your life the way you want it to be, the way you imagine it being. If the world were perfect is what I typically ask you. If the world were perfect, then what? And I want you to then, when I say the world perfect, you now are free to remove any obstacles, any obstructions, any limitations that the world will place in front of you. It's your world, and you could do whatever you want to do with it. Then what? And then I'd ask people in every day as a part of that, what, to borrow from the great movie Barbie, what was I made for? What was I made for? Because when I ask and answer those questions each morning, that's essentially what I do in my journal. I have a different world. I have a different outlook about what the world is, about what my world is. Some days I'm walking on the beach on the Pacific coast. Some days I'm somewhere in front of an audience of 100,000 people giving a presentation. Some days I've been asked to be the U.S. Secretary of Citizenry. It doesn't exist, but we definitely need someone in this country to give us an idea about what it actually means to be a citizen of a nation, as opposed to everybody thinking that they have an idea of what it is we should be doing. But yeah, every day I wake up. Some days it's a song that I hear, and I write about a song I heard. 2 days ago it was Candy by Cameo, and somehow I incorporate that into what I want to be. So I say all that to say that what I want to do is to be a global public intellectual, such that if you ask me about anything, I'm capable of having a conversation, so that I never feel like I can only talk about the thing that I want to talk about.
Oh, man, I love that. So then I will ask, because I think it's important for folks to be able to journal. And, it's something that a lot of us don't do. We don't even think about doing, but allows us to open up the world, based on what we're able to write down, go back and see. So what has journaling meant to you over the time that you've been doing it? And maybe you can help folks understand how important it is to
Sure.
do it.
So as I mentioned earlier, everything the reason that I'm here with you today is because a woman thought me worthy enough to bear a child with me. That is why I'm here. And so, but everything that I've done in the last 30 years have been guided by a relationship with a child. So my 4-year-old son, we enrolled him in soccer. It's an 8-week program, these youth programs. So he's learning how to play soccer. The first 6 weeks, he hates it. He hates soccer. Week 7, he and I in the car, and the three of us in the car, and he's in the back seat. And I said, hey man, you know what you should do today? You should try visualizing. And he said, well, what's that? It's 4-year-old. What's visualizing? So I explained it to him. It's just when you imagine something, son, happening, and then you just see it, and then I said, I said, don't worry about it. When you do this, when you envision this, the universe is going to bend to your will. Whatever you envision is going to happen. So he said, how do I do it? So I said, just close your eyes for a second, and I'll just kind of guide you through it. So what do you see happening today? And he says this: I steal the ball from somebody. I said, what side of the field are you on? He said, I'm on the right side of the field. I steal the ball from someone, he's going left, and I steal the ball from him, and I go down the field, I fake out a guy, and I kick the ball in the goal. And I promise you, that is exactly what he did. Wow. So on the way home, he is now seeing soccer differently, because now he's like, I got a process. I figured this out. So the next week, we're going back. I'm looking in the rearview mirror, and his eyes are closed. And I tap my wife, and she looks back. She's just like kind of smiling. So I said, hey, are you visualized? He said, mm-hmm. And he says, Dad, I see this. And he says he scores 2 goals. And Doc, he goes out and he scores 2 goals. So now he is all in. When is the season? Is the season over? When do we play again? I'm like, you like it now? Yeah, I want to play again. And so I say that to say I hadn't done that in my own life. I had no vision for my own life. So I am giving all these lessons to a child, and I am not doing it myself. So before he leaves for Brazil, the 16-year-old turns to me, and we're in the car, and he's looking at me, and he said, what's wrong? And I said, man, like, you here, and I'm sure you felt this way, you got here a lot faster than I imagined. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, what's the problem? Isn't that what you wanted from me? He said, Dad, well, can I ask you a question? What are your dreams? Yes. And I was like, I don't have any. My dream was you. He says, well, Dad, it's not too late. You still have time. You can do more. And so thus, that's how that first book comes about, because he's now told me, he's giving me the directive. A few years later, he's done with undergrad. He's a part of this program called GYM. I'm asked to speak at this event. This is a room, an event full of young men and women who are going off to these elite institutions to work on their PhDs or masters in STEM subjects. And the students approach me and they're like, "Hey, Mr. Turner, that's some great stuff you shared. Your son's here, right?" I said, "Yeah." And they said, do you, and they were asking about him, and I was explaining, they're like, "Man, he's like, we all think we great, but like, he is really phenomenal. Mr. Turner, do you do this stuff?" And I said, like all great hypocrites, no. No. I don't journal. I don't have a mantra. I don't affirm nothing. I don't have no vision for my life. And I was like, you know what? I need to start doing that. So since 2018, I've been writing my life. I've been doing what I call backward design, or journaling forward. I've been journaling forward. And many of the things that I wrote have come to fruition. I wanted to speak in front of 10,000 people, done. I wanted to do a TED Talk, done. I wanted to earn, 5 figures speaking, done. Like, I wanted to write so many books. I wanted to write for these kinds of places like the Washington Post, and done. So yeah, I put those things down, and then it feels like I end up chasing my words or chasing the vision that I had.
Thank you for that. Thank you for being on my podcast today, and the willingness for you to tell us who you were and why you've become who you are. It's one of my favorite, podcasts that I've done, as I have notes after notes after notes that I take it from you, because it's helping me, and if you're able to help me and touch my heart and touch, my evolution of where I'm trying to go, and then, it can't help but help other folks. And so, you being on here, I hope we'll be able to talk again. Hope we'll be able to see ourselves on stages of the world, talking to others and helping them experience life in a way that can be so impactful and special at the same time. And so your words have been taken, hopefully they've been planted, and they've now will be able to grow and turn into something that's just simply amazing. So I appreciate, for those of you watching the show. Yeah, I'll let you.
I was gonna say, it's been my pleasure, and I'm grateful that you reached out to me and chose to have me on. I appreciate it very much.
Absolutely. So you guys go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit the notification button. I promise you that every time we do one of these, that there's something that you can learn from it. And so whether you watch all 107 or 8 now that we have, or you just watch 1 or 2 and you pick out the ones that will directly affect who you are as a person, you will grow and you will be better. And so go ahead and do whatever that is that you got to do to continue to watch it. I want to be here for you again over this year and interview a whole bunch of other folks. The other thing I believe is you are God's greatest gift. And you have the ability to take that and to become what it is that he put you on this planet to do. So do that as well. So you guys have an awesome, wonderful, just incredible day. We will talk to you on the next one, and we'll look forward to it. You guys have a great day.